East Haven, a struggling neighborhood on the outskirts of Detroit. 12-year-old Jaden Carter lived with his mother, Naomi Carter, in a small, deteriorating rental house that barely stood against time. The walls were scarred with peeling paint, as if shedding the remnants of forgotten hopes, and the pipes groaned whenever they dared to turn the water on. Life had been an unyielding struggle for them ever since Jaden's father, Elijah Carter, had died in a devastating explosion at the very garage he had built with his own hands. Once a well-respected mechanic, Elijah had taken pride in breathing life back into old cars, dreaming of the day he would pass the business down to his son. But fate had been merciless, robbing them of the man who had been their protector, their provider, their everything. After his death, Naomi, a skilled mechanic in her own right, had no choice but to take over the shop. It wasn't easy. Being a black woman in a trade dominated by men meant she constantly had to prove herself. Customers doubted her skills, and some days no one even showed up. The garage would sit in silence, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional screech of tires. Money was tight, bills piled up. There were nights when Naomi went to bed hungry just so Jaden could eat a full meal. But she never complained. She refused to let her son see her break. Jaden, despite his young age, understood their struggles. He had been forced to grow up too fast, burdened with responsibilities beyond his years. Every evening he was at the shop, handing his mother tools, learning the names of car parts, and watching as she worked tirelessly, her hands covered in grease, sweat glistening on her brow. He admired her strength, her resilience, but he also saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. And he made a silent promise. One day, he would carry that weight for her. But their battles weren't just financial. Danger lurked in plain sight. Two white police officers, Sergeant Greg Maddox and Officer Dean Wallace, had been harassing them for months. These weren't the kind of cops who upheld justice. They were corrupt, cruel, and unapologetically racist. They would park their squad car outside the shop, strutting in as if they owned the place. "Fix our car," Maddox would order, never offering a single dollar. If Naomi hesitated, Wallace would smirk and remind her, "We can make things real difficult for you, lady." She had no choice. She knew the power they held over her. A single fabricated violation could shut her business down, or worse. So she kept her head down and fixed their car, swallowing her pride, knowing that in this world, some fights had to be fought in silence. Again and again, Naomi was forced to work for free while they lounged around, mocking her, belittling her, reminding her just how little they thought of her and her son. But it didn't stop there. They started demanding money too. "Consider it a fee for keeping this place open," Wallace sneered one evening, his cold blue eyes glinting with amusement. Naomi had no extra money to give. Every dollar was stretched thin, barely covering rent, food, and the shop's upkeep. But out of fear, she handed over whatever little she could, hoping they'd leave them alone. But they never did. The more she gave, the greedier they became. Jaden despised them. Every time they walked into the shop, his fists clenched, his jaw tightened, his blood boiled. He wanted to scream at them, fight back, tell them they had no right to do this. But he knew it would only make things worse. His mother had warned him, "Baby, we can't afford to make enemies with the law. They don't see us as equals. They never will." So he swallowed his anger, pushing it deep inside, vowing that one day things would change. That night, after locking up the shop, Jaden and Naomi walked home in silence. The neon glow of flickering streetlights cast long shadows on the cracked pavement. Jaden finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Mama, are we always going to live like this?" Naomi stopped walking, turning to face him. She saw the frustration in his eyes, the pain, the desperate need for something more. She knelt down, cupping his face in her grease-streaked hands. "No, baby. One day, we're going to have a better life. I promise you that." But neither of them knew that fate had already set a plan in motion, one that would change their lives forever. It was a humid evening, and the scent of burnt rubber and gasoline clung to the air outside. Carter's auto repair. Naomi and Jaden wiped their hands on old rags, exhaustion weighing on them. The day had been slow, only 2 customers. Just enough to keep the lights on for another week. Naomi sighed as she counted the crumpled bills in her palm, knowing it wasn't even close to what they needed for rent. Jaden watched her, his heart heavy. He hated seeing his mother like this, tired, worn down, yet still holding everything together. Just as Naomi was about to lock up for the night, a deep, rumbling engine echoed through the quiet street. Both she and Jaden turned toward the sound as a sleek white Lamborghini Urus rolled into the dimly lit parking lot. It was the kind of car they only ever saw in magazines, the kind owned by people who never had to worry about money. The headlights dimmed. The driver's side door swung open. A tall, elegant woman stepped out, her stiletto heels clicking against the pavement. She wore a short white miniskirt, her golden blonde hair cascading in soft waves down her shoulders. A diamond bracelet on her wrist glittered under the streetlight. Everything about her screamed power and privilege. The effortless confidence in her stride, the way she moved as if the world belonged to her. This woman had never known struggle, never fought to survive. "Evening," the woman said, her voice smooth, her tone light but firm. "I was passing through and needed to refuel." Naomi wiped her hands on her overalls and nodded toward the fuel pump near the garage. "You can fill up right there, cash or card." "Card," the woman replied, her gaze flickering around the lot before settling on Naomi. "By the way, this is a repair shop too, right?" Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Yeah, why? Your car giving you trouble?" The woman shook her head. "Not really, but I figured I'd have it checked while I'm here." She flashed a brief smile before adding, "Money's not an issue." Naomi nodded, though suspicion lingered in the back of her mind. Wealthy people didn't just drop by struggling black-owned repair shops in the middle of Detroit. But business was business. "All right, pop the hood." As Naomi inspected the pristine engine, clearly maintained by top-tier professionals, Jaden couldn't help but stare at the woman in awe. Everything about her screamed power, privilege, and a life so far removed from their own. She must have felt his gaze because she turned toward him and smiled. "What's your name, kid?" Jaden hesitated. Wealthy white people rarely spoke to kids like him, and when they did, it was never with kindness. But as he met her piercing blue eyes, something about her seemed different. "Jaden," he mumbled. "Nice to meet you, Jaden." She crouched slightly to his level, her voice warm. "I'm Evelyn Sinclair." Jaden's eyes widened slightly. The name sounded familiar. Then it hit him. Evelyn Sinclair, the wife of Robert Sinclair, one of the richest men in the country. Even Naomi looked up from under the hood, surprise flickering across her face. She had heard of the Sinclair family. Their faces were plastered across business magazines, their names synonymous with real estate empires and billion-dollar investments. The fact that one of them had just casually stopped at her tiny shop was almost unbelievable. Evelyn glanced around. "You do good work here." Naomi hesitated before answering. "It was my husband's. After he passed, I took over." Evelyn's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." Naomi nodded, appreciating the sentiment but not letting her guard down. "Your car's fine, by the way, no issues." Evelyn smiled, reaching into her Louis Vuitton purse and pulling out a crisp stack of $100 bills. She handed them to Jaden. "For your help." Jaden stared at the money in shock. Naomi straightened, eyes narrowing. "That's too much, ma'am. We didn't even fix anything." Evelyn shrugged. "Call it a tip. You deserve it." Naomi wanted to refuse, but pride didn't pay the bills. So with a quiet nod, she accepted the money, her fingers tightening around the bills as if afraid they might disappear. This would help. A lot. Evelyn flashed another smile before stepping back toward her car. "Well, thanks for checking. I should get going before it gets too late." As she climbed into the driver's seat and pulled onto the road, Jaden watched until her taillights disappeared into the night. He didn't know why, but something about that woman felt different. It wasn't just her wealth, or the fact that she had treated them with respect. It was something else, something unspoken, and he had no idea that in less than an hour, her life would be in grave danger. Evelyn Sinclair had always believed that money and power granted a certain level of security. She lived in a world of high-rise penthouses, private chauffeurs, and gated communities where danger was something that happened to other people. Other people. Danger happened to other people, those without the means to protect themselves. But as Evelyn Sinclair drove down the dark, empty road that night, she began to realize just how fragile that illusion truly was. The city lights had long faded behind her, swallowed by the night. Only endless stretches of asphalt and the occasional flickering street lamp remained. Her white Lamborghini Urus glided effortlessly over the cracked pavement, its powerful engine a low, steady growl beneath her. She had taken a less traveled route to avoid the usual traffic heading out of Detroit. Big mistake. The moment she spotted the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror, a wave of annoyance passed over her. A police stop? At this hour? She wasn't worried. She had done nothing wrong, but the inconvenience irritated her. Sighing, she slowed down, pulling onto the side of the road. Hands resting on the wheel, she waited as the two officers approached. Then, she saw their faces. Sergeant Greg Maddox and Officer Dean Wallace. A sharp unease crept up her spine. She had encountered their type before. Entitled, arrogant white men who thought their badges made them untouchable. They weren't the well-mannered by-the-book officers she was accustomed to seeing at high-profile fundraisers and social events. Their movements were slow, deliberate. Maddox, the taller of the two, leaned against her driver's side window, shining his flashlight directly into her face. "Evening, sweetheart," he drawled. "What's a pretty little thing like you doing out here all alone?" Evelyn instantly disliked him. His tone was casual, but there was something beneath it. An edge, a quiet threat. A false friendliness that sent warning bells clanging in her head. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice calm, controlled. Wallace, the stockier one, leaned against the hood of her car, smirking. "That depends," he said. "Where you headed?" "Home," Evelyn replied shortly. "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" Maddox's smile widened. "Routine stop, ma'am. You don't mind if we take a look inside your car, do you?" Evelyn frowned. "I do mind, actually. What's the probable cause?" Wallace let out a low chuckle. "Probable cause? You're out here alone, in the middle of nowhere, driving a damn Lamborghini. That's enough for us." Evelyn's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She had been in boardrooms negotiating multi-million-dollar deals with ruthless businessmen. But this was different. The air was thick with unspoken intent, and she could feel it crawling over her skin like a warning. "I'd like to call my lawyer," she said, reaching for her phone. Too slow. Maddox's hand shot into the car, snatching the phone before she could react. "Tsk, no need for that," he said smoothly, locking the screen and slipping the phone into his pocket. Evelyn's heart pounded. "That's theft," she snapped. Wallace stepped closer. "We can charge you for resisting if you want to make this difficult." Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. "Then let's do this properly. Search warrant. Any legal justification for this stop at all?" Maddox tilted his head, eyeing her up and down like she was nothing but a plaything. "Lady, I don't think you understand how this works out here." His voice was almost amused. "It's just us. No cameras, no witnesses, no rich." To be continued. "Would you like me to continue with this style for the next part?" "No rich husband to protect you." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. Maddox placed a hand on the roof of her car, leaning in closer. His smirk widened, his breath hot against the night air. "Why don't you step out so we can have a little chat?" Evelyn knew better than to comply. The moment she got out of that car, she would no longer be in control. Instead, she reached for the lock button and pressed it. A mechanical click sealed all four doors. Maddox's smirk vanished. "That's not very cooperative, sweetheart." Evelyn ignored the frantic pounding of her heart and reached for the emergency call button built into the dashboard. Before she could press it, bang! Wallace's fist slammed against the window, making her flinch. "You think that little rich girl attitude is gonna save you?" he sneered. "Out here, you ain't nothing but a piece of ass we can have any time we want." Evelyn's stomach churned in disgust. "Step away from my car." This time, her voice was ice. Maddox and Wallace exchanged glances. Then, without warning, Maddox punched her. The blow landed hard against her cheek, a sharp explosion of pain searing through her skull. Her head snapped sideways, slamming against the headrest. Black spots danced in her vision. Before she could recover, Maddox reached in and yanked at the door handle. The lock held. His expression twisted with rage. "You little..." Evelyn's instincts. "Move, now." She reached for the ignition and slammed her foot against the gas pedal. The engine roared to life. Wallace banged his fist against the hood. "Oh no, you don't." Evelyn threw the car into reverse and floored it. The Lamborghini lurched backward at high speed, forcing both officers to jump out of the way. Then, before they could recover, she slammed it into drive and took off. Tires screeched against the pavement. Her hands gripped the wheel, tight, her heart hammering in her chest. She had to get away. Somewhere they couldn't follow. But then, flashing red and blue lights filled her rearview mirror again. They were chasing her. Evelyn's breath came in short, panicked bursts. She pushed the Lamborghini to its limits. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to escape. The speedometer climbed past 90 miles per hour. But the road was treacherous, narrow, filled with potholes and barely illuminated. Then, disaster. A sharp turn appeared out of nowhere. She didn't see it in time. The tires skidded. The car spun out of control. The world tilted violently as the Lamborghini flipped. Glass shattered. Metal crunched. Pain exploded through her body. Then, darkness. Lying in the middle of the road, Evelyn Sinclair was unconscious. Broken. Alone. Except for the two men who had been hunting her. Maddox and Wallace pulled up beside the wreckage, stepping out slowly. Maddox nudged her motionless body with his boot. "Well, looks like she's done for." Wallace smirked. "Guess we don't need to clean up the mess after all." They laughed. Their cruelty echoed into the empty night. Then, without another glance, they got back into their squad car and drove away, leaving her to die. Fate wasn't done with her yet. Because just a few miles down the road, Naomi and Jaden Carter were heading home. And they were about to find her. The night was unnaturally still as Naomi drove down the deserted road, her old Chevy pickup rattling with every bump and crack in the pavement. Her dim headlights barely pierced the darkness, casting long, distorted shadows against the trees lining the roadside. Jaden sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window, his thoughts far away. Neither of them spoke much. It had been another long, exhausting day at the shop, and both were drowning in their own silent frustrations. For Naomi, it was the bills piling up, the relentless harassment from those corrupt cops, the constant suffocation of poverty. Every day felt like a battle she was barely winning. How much longer could she hold on? Jaden, meanwhile, was thinking about Evelyn Sinclair. She had been different. She had noticed him, spoken to him like he mattered, even given them more money than they had earned. When she smiled at him, he had felt something strange. Not pity, not condescension, but acknowledgement, like she actually saw them. People like her weren't supposed to care about people like them. And yet, she had. Then, suddenly, Naomi slammed the brakes. Hard. The truck lurched forward, its tires screeching violently against the pavement. Jaden was thrown forward, his seatbelt digging into his chest. "Mom, what the hell?" he gasped, gripping the dashboard. Naomi didn't answer. Her wide eyes were locked ahead. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Lying motionless in the middle of the road was a woman. Jaden followed his mother's gaze, and his stomach dropped. The white miniskirt, the blonde hair, matted with blood. The crumpled body, barely illuminated by the headlights. "Oh my God, it's her," Jaden shouted. Naomi's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. She threw the truck into park, her heart hammering violently. Then, instinct took over. She rushed out of the car, sprinting toward the broken figure on the pavement. Jaden was right behind her. Evelyn Sinclair was barely alive. Her skin was ghostly pale. Her lips were slightly parted as though struggling for breath. A nasty gash on her forehead dripped blood down the side of her face. Her arms and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises. Her once luxurious white skirt was torn and stained with dirt. Her expensive heels lay several feet away, flung from her feet during the crash. Naomi immediately knelt beside her. Pressing two fingers to Evelyn's neck, searching desperately for a pulse, for a terrifying moment. Nothing. No, no. Come on, honey. Don't do this, Naomi whispered, leaning closer. Then faint but steady. Gath, she's alive. Jaden exhaled a shaky breath. What happened to her? Naomi's eyes flicked toward the wreckage of the Lamborghini, lying several feet away. The front end was completely crushed. Smoke was rising from under the hood. Looks like a crash. But Naomi's words trailed off as a deep frown crept onto her face. Something didn't feel right. The scene looked too deliberate. The location was too isolated. And one question lingered in her mind. Why the hell was a woman like Evelyn Sinclair alone out here? In the middle of the night? Alone. Beaten. Then Jaden's voice cut through the silence. Mom, look at her face. Naomi glanced down, and for the first time, she saw the bruises, not from the crash. Fresh, dark, violent. Naomi's stomach twisted. These weren't injuries from the impact. Someone had hit her hard with anger. Somebody did this to her. Then, a weak, shaky breath escaped Evelyn's lips. Her eyelids fluttered open. Her blue eyes, glassy and disoriented, darted around in confusion before finally settling on Naomi and Jaden. For a moment, she didn't react. Then, no, don't touch me. Get away. Evelyn gasped, her body convulsing as she tried to crawl backward. Naomi quickly raised her hands. Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe. Evelyn's breathing was ragged. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her entire body trembling like she had just escaped a nightmare. They hurt me, she whispered, her voice broken, barely audible. The cops, they tried to. She trailed off, but Naomi already understood. The bruises, the terror in her eyes, the way she flinched at every movement. Naomi felt sick. Jaden's fists clenched. Those bastards. He had seen the way those cops acted at their shop, but he never imagined they were capable of something this evil. Suddenly, Evelyn winced, her face twisting in pain. My phone. Where's my phone? Naomi frowned. Sweetheart, you don't have your phone. It's not in your car either. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut, her breath quickened. They took it. Her voice, those bastards took it. Naomi's heart pounded. They had to leave. Fast. If those cops realized Evelyn was still alive, they'd come back. And this time, they wouldn't just leave her for dead. Naomi turned to Jaden. Help me lift her. We're taking her home. Jaden nodded immediately, reaching under Evelyn's shoulders while Naomi took her legs. Evelyn let out a soft whimper of pain as they lifted her, but she was too weak to resist. They carefully laid her in the back seat of the truck, covering her with a worn-out blanket Naomi always kept under the seat. Evelyn's body trembled uncontrollably. Her breaths came in shallow gasps. Her eyes darted toward the windows, as if expecting the cops to return any second. Naomi started the truck. Her hands trembled against the wheel. Every nerve in her body screamed that she was making a dangerous decision. She was harboring a woman attacked by the police, a white, wealthy woman who had just been left for dead by two dirty cops. This could get them killed. But then she looked at Evelyn, broken, terrified, barely holding on. And she knew she couldn't leave her there. Naomi clenched her jaw. Hold on, sweetheart, we're gonna take care of you. And with that, she stepped on the gas, unknowingly bringing a storm straight to her doorstep. Naomi drove fast, faster than she ever had before. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the wheel. The old Chevy's engine roared, pushed to its limits, tearing down the empty road. Away from the wreckage, away from the danger. But not far enough. Not yet. Away from the wreckage. Away from the nightmare that had nearly swallowed Evelyn Sinclair whole. Naomi kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see flashing red and blue lights at any moment. Half expecting those two bastards, Maddox and Wallace, to realize what they had left behind, to come back and finish the job. But the road remained empty. For now. In the back seat, Evelyn was slipping in and out of consciousness. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale. She clutched the worn-out blanket tightly around her bruised body, her fingers trembling violently. Shock, pain, fear. Naomi had seen this before. That look, the look of someone who had been preyed upon, brutalized, left to rot like they didn't matter. She glanced at Jaden. He sat rigidly in the passenger seat, his fists clenched in his lap. His expression was a storm cloud, a mix of rage, confusion, and something else. Determination. He hadn't said much since they put Evelyn in the truck, but Naomi knew what he was thinking. She knew because she was thinking the same thing. This wasn't just some random attack. This was power being abused in the worst way. This was corruption at its ugliest. Racism at its deadliest. Monsters hiding behind badges. And now, they were involved. The old truck rattled as Naomi turned onto their street. A row of small, aging houses, barely standing under the weight of time and poverty. Their home was nothing special. A tiny 2-bedroom rental, with a rusted-out front gate and a sagging roof. But tonight, it would have to be a sanctuary. Naomi pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They had made it home. But this was only the beginning. Jaden was already opening his door, moving fast toward the back seat. "Come on, we need to get her inside." Naomi hurried to the other side as well. Evelyn stirred slightly, a soft, escaping her lips, half a whimper, half a breathless sob. "We got you, baby. You're safe now, okay?" Naomi whispered, gently brushing damp strands of blonde hair from Evelyn's clammy forehead. Together, she and Jaden carefully lifted her out of the truck. Evelyn flinched at the movement, sucking in a sharp breath. But she was too weak to protest. Naomi could feel the cold radiating off her skin. Her strength was fading fast. She needed medical attention. But calling an ambulance meant calling the cops. And right now, they were the last people Evelyn could afford to see. So Naomi did the only thing she could. She would take care of her herself. They carried Evelyn up the small wooden steps of the porch, the house creaking beneath their weight. Naomi nudged the front door open with her shoulder. The moment they stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around them. A stark contrast to the cold, merciless night outside. They moved quickly. Naomi's bedroom was the only room with a halfway decent bed. The mattress wasn't much, but it was better than the hard floor. Better than the freezing pavement she had been left to die on. They carefully lowered her onto the bed. Evelyn groaned softly, her brows knitting together in pain. Jaden took a step back, his eyes flicking over her battered body. This woman? Evelyn Sinclair, a woman who had everything, had almost lost everything. And the worst part was, this wasn't over yet. "Mom, we need to do something. She's not okay." Naomi nodded, already moving. "Get the first aid kit from the bathroom and bring me a towel." Jaden rushed off. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, studying the broken woman before her. Up close, Evelyn's injuries looked even worse. Her cheek was swollen where she had been hit, a dark bruise blooming over her sharp cheekbone. Dirt and dried blood streaked her arms and legs. And when Naomi carefully pulled back the blanket, her stomach twisted at the sight. Deep purple bruises covered her ribs. Handprints. As if she had been grabbed, restrained. Naomi's jaw tightened. "Those sons of—" she muttered under her breath. Jaden returned moments later, carrying the first aid kit, a bowl of warm water, and a towel. Naomi wasted no time. She dampened the towel and began gently wiping away the grime, cleaning the blood from Evelyn's face and arms. Evelyn barely reacted, her body too exhausted to fight. Naomi worked with practice and precision. Years of fixing cars had given her steady hands, the ability to mend things that were broken. But this wasn't a car. This was a human being. A woman who had been brutalized and left for dead. Jaden stood at the edge of the room, watching silently. His jaw was tight, his hands still balled into fists. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, why would they do this to her?" Naomi didn't answer right away. She finished cleaning Evelyn's wounds, then took a deep breath, looking up at her son. "Because they could." Jaden's eyes darkened. "And they'll get away with it, won't they?" Naomi didn't want to lie to him. The truth was bitter and ugly. People like them always do. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then a quiet, trembling voice interrupted them. Not this time. Naomi and Jaden both turned. Evelyn was struggling to sit up, her face tight with pain, but her blue eyes burned with something new. Fury. They think I'm dead, don't they? Evelyn rasped. Naomi nodded slowly. Looks like it. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Good. Let them think that, for now. Waden, what do you mean? Evelyn took a shaky breath, then looked at both of them. Really looked at them. Something in her expression shifted. This wasn't a helpless woman anymore. This was someone who had just been through hell and come out the other side with nothing left to lose. And that made her dangerous. I need to call my husband. Evelyn's voice was steel, despite her weakness. Robert can't know I'm here, not yet. But when the time comes, her blue eyes flashed. We're going to burn those bastards to the ground. Naomi studied her for a moment. Then she nodded. Jaden, still filled with rage and unanswered questions, exhaled and crossed his arms. I want to help. His voice was firm. Whatever happens, I want to help. Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time since she had woken up, she smiled. You already have, kid. You already have. Outside, the night stretched on, quiet, still, but the storm was coming, and this time, the ones who thought they were untouchable were about to learn what it meant to be hunted. Naomi Carter had always known that trouble had a way of finding black folks, even when they weren't looking for it. But tonight, she hadn't just found trouble. She had invited it into her home and given it a place to stay. Naomi sat at the small, worn-out kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. She hadn't taken a single sip. Across from her, Jaden sat just as still, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the hallway leading to the bedroom where Evelyn Sinclair lay recovering. It had been hours since they brought her here, and still, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that the moment she let her guard down, everything would come crashing down around them. Outside, the neighborhood was eerily quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet. The heavy, suffocating kind. The type of silence that preceded a storm. The type that said, something bad was coming. Naomi was about to tell Jaden to get some sleep when the sound of tires crunching against gravel made her heart stop. Jaden heard it too. He sat up straighter, his body tensing like a coiled spring. "Man?" Naomi's breath came out slow and measured. She knew this was coming. A car door slammed, then another, then a knock at the front door. Naomi and Jaden locked eyes. Neither of them moved. Another knock, louder this time. "Mrs. Carter, open up, it's the police." Jaden shot up from his chair, rage flashing in his eyes. "It's them." Naomi stood slowly. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm, controlled, unreadable. "Go to the bedroom," she whispered. "Stay with her. Lock the door. No matter what happens, you don't open it. Understand?" Jaden hesitated. "Understand," Naomi repeated, firmer this time. Jaden swallowed hard, then gave a short nod before disappearing down the hallway. Naomi turned toward the door. She inhaled deeply, then unlatched the chain and unlocked it. She wasn't scared. She had seen real monsters before. These were just men. She opened the door. Standing on her porch, bathed in the dim glow of the streetlight, were Sergeant Greg Maddox and Officer Dean Wallace. Naomi had never hated two men more in her life. Maddox stood with his arms crossed over his chest, his smug smile barely concealed. Wallace, as always, was a little slower, a little dumber. His cold eyes swept over the small house, like he was already thinking about what he could break. Naomi leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "It's late, officers." Maddox smirked. "That it is, ma'am. Sorry to bother you at this hour, but well, we had a little situation earlier tonight." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That so?" Maddox nodded. "Rich lady driving through town. Evelyn Sinclair. You know the name?" Naomi kept her expression neutral. "Can't say I do." Wallace stepped forward, licking his lips. "We pulled her over earlier. She got a little mouthy, so we had to put her in her place. But, well, the damn woman drove off, and wouldn't you know it, she crashed." Naomi clenched her jaw so tight she thought her teeth might break. Maddox sighed dramatically. Real shame, too. Poor thing was in bad shape. But you know, accidents happen. Didn't blink. Smile thinned. And she was gone when we came back. Naomi tilted her head. Gone? Maddox's cold blue eyes flickered. He took a slow step forward. That's right. And here's the thing, Mrs. Carter. People like her? His smile returned. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. They don't just disappear. Eyes locked onto hers. Yeah, must have crawled away somewhere. We looked, but no luck. Maddox's voice was casual. Too casual. So we figured, maybe someone around here saw something. Naomi exhaled through her nose. Can't help you. Wallace took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. You sure about that? Naomi stared at him, her expression unreadable. She wasn't afraid of these men. Not because she didn't know what they were capable of, but because she did. Maddox sighed, placing a hand on his hip. Mrs. Carter, you run a nice little shop, don't you? Naomi stiffened. Maddox's smile widened. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. His voice was smooth, almost amused. Like, say, an inspection. Finding a whole bunch of violations, you'd be shut down in a heartbeat. Naomi felt pure fire burn through her veins. These bastards had already been bleeding her dry, forcing her to fix their damn police car for free, taking her money, making her life a living hell. And now, they wanted more. She wanted to grab the nearest wrench and smash their skulls in, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled. A slow, knowing, mocking smile. You know what's funny? She asked, leaning in slightly. Maddox's smirk faltered. What? Naomi's voice dropped to a whisper. You sound nervous. Wallace's brow furrowed. What the hell does that mean? Naomi tilted her head. I mean, if you're so sure she's gone. She let the words hang in the air. Why are you two so damn worried? Maddox's face darkened. Careful now. Naomi didn't move. Oh, I'm always careful, officer. The tension was so thick, you could have cut it with a blade. Then finally, Maddox exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Fine, play it that way. He turned to Wallace. Let's go. But before they left, Maddox leaned in close. His breath was hot against her face. I know she's here. His voice was a whisper, a promise, a threat. And I will find her. Naomi didn't flinch. Good luck with that. Maddox's jaw tightened. But he said nothing. With one last glare, he and Wallace turned and walked back to their squad car. Naomi stood on the porch, watching them drive away. Her hands shook at her sides. They would be back. But when they did, Naomi wouldn't be waiting to be hunted. She would be ready. She closed the door. Jaden emerged from the hallway, his face pale, but his eyes burning. Mom, he said slowly, we can't let them win. Naomi looked at her son, at the determination in his face, at the woman in the bedroom, a woman who had more power in her little finger than those bastard cops ever would. She exhaled. No, baby, she said, we won't. The weight of the night pressed against the small, aging house, thick with the scent of fear, gasoline, and something else. Rage. The air inside was stifling, the tension palpable, the silence sharp enough to cut through bone. Naomi stood motionless in the dimly lit living room, staring at the front door long after Maddox and Wallace had left. Her pulse still thundered in her ears, but she refused to let fear root itself in her chest. Fear wouldn't protect Jaden. Fear wouldn't keep Evelyn safe. Fear wouldn't stop those men from coming back. She turned toward the hallway, toward the small bedroom where Evelyn Sinclair, billionaire, socialite, and survivor, lay recovering. The woman had been through hell, but Naomi could see it in her eyes, in the set of her jaw, and she knew this fight wasn't over. She wasn't broken. No, Evelyn Sinclair was something else entirely. She was angry, and that made her dangerous. Naomi pushed open the bedroom door. The warm glow of the bedside lamp cast shadows across the walls, making the small room feel even smaller. Jaden was sitting beside Evelyn on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped together, watching her like she might disappear at any moment. Evelyn was awake now, fully alert, her expression sharpened by fury. They came here, didn't they? Her voice was hoarse but steady. Her piercing blue eyes locked onto Naomi's. Naomi nodded. They know you're missing? They think we might have seen something." Evelyn let out a sharp breath, wincing as she tried to sit up straighter. The bruises on her ribs were dark and angry, a painful reminder of the hell those bastards had put her through. Naomi moved toward her. "You shouldn't be sitting up." Evelyn ignored the warning. "I need a phone." Naomi frowned. "Why?" Evelyn exhaled slowly, steadying herself before answering. "Because I need to call my husband." Jaden's eyebrows lifted slightly. "The billionaire guy?" "Robert, he needs to know what happened." Naomi hesitated. There was a risk in this. Calling someone as powerful as Robert Sinclair meant that things would escalate fast. The moment he found out his wife had been attacked and left for dead, there would be no containing the fallout. There would be no going back. Evelyn saw Naomi's hesitation and leaned forward despite the pain. "Naomi, listen to me. Those cops left me there because they thought I wouldn't survive. They think I'm dead, and if they find out I'm not, what do you think they'll do?" Naomi's fingers curled into fists. She already knew the answer. "They'll come back." Jaden's voice was quiet, certain. Evelyn nodded. "And they won't leave witnesses this time." Naomi inhaled sharply. Then, she grabbed the old landline phone from the nightstand. She placed it in Evelyn's hands. "Call your husband." Evelyn didn't waste a second. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed a number from memory. Her breathing was uneven. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, a deep, commanding voice answered. "Evelyn." A shudder went through her body at the sound of her husband's voice. Robert Sinclair was not a man who panicked easily. He had built an empire on being ruthless, calculated, and always in control. But right now, his voice was taut with fear. "Robert," Evelyn whispered, her throat tightening. "I'm alive." A beat of silence, then his voice sharp as a blade. "Where are you? Who did this to you?" Evelyn swallowed hard. I was attacked by cops." She squeezed her eyes shut. "They left me to die, Robert. If it weren't for Naomi and Jaden, I wouldn't be talking to you right now." A sharp intake of breath. Then, when Robert spoke again, his voice was cold. "Dangerous. Give me the address, right now." Naomi met Evelyn's gaze. Then, she nodded. This was the right move. Evelyn gave Robert the address, and the moment she did, she knew the war had begun. 20 minutes later, they heard the engines. Naomi and Jaden were still sitting in the living room, barely speaking. The weight of the situation pressed down on them. Evelyn was still in the bedroom, resting, waiting. Then, the rumble of multiple SUVs filled the night. The ground shook beneath them. Headlights pierced through the darkness, illuminating the small house. And Naomi knew the storm had arrived. Jaden ran to the window. He pushed the curtain aside just enough to see, and his eyes widened. "Mom," he whispered. "There's like 10 cars out there." Naomi stood and stepped beside him, and what she saw made her breath catch. A convoy of sleek, black SUVs pulled up outside their house. The vehicles were silent and menacing, their dark-tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like black mirrors. Then, the doors opened. Men in suits stepped out, moving like shadows. Private security. Armed, deadly. These weren't just bodyguards. These were men trained for war. And then the last SUV's door opened. Robert Sinclair stepped out. Naomi had seen pictures of him before, but they didn't do him justice. He was tall, imposing, a man who carried power like it was woven into his very bones. His expensive charcoal gray suit was crisp and untouched by the long drive. But it wasn't the money that made him terrifying. It was his presence. His face was unreadable. His jaw clenched, his eyes burned with barely contained fury. He didn't hesitate. He marched toward the front door, his security following like a pack of wolves at his back. Naomi opened the door before he could knock. Robert's gaze snapped to her. His eyes, the same piercing blue as Evelyn's but far colder, studied her, calculating, judging. "Where's my wife?" Naomi stepped aside. "Inside. Follow me." Robert didn't say another word. He strode inside like he owned the place, his men spreading out instantly, scanning every inch of the house, securing the exits. Naomi led him down the hall. to the small bedroom where Evelyn waited. The moment Robert stepped into the room, Evelyn's eyes met his, and the dam broke. She wasn't the untouchable billionaire socialite right now. She wasn't the powerful businesswoman who could command a boardroom with a single word. She was a woman who had almost lost everything. "Robert?" she whispered. Robert crossed the room in 3 long strides and gathered her into his arms. His grip was desperate, unyielding. Naomi and Jaden stepped back, giving them space. Robert held his wife like she might disappear if he let go. Then he pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumb gently brushing over the bruises those bastards had left on her. His face went blank, cold, deadly. "Tell me their names." Evelyn's lip trembled, but her eyes hardened. "Greg Maddox and Dean Wallace, Detroit PD." Robert nodded once, no hesitation, no doubt. Then he turned to one of his men. "Call the FBI, call our contacts in internal affairs." His voice was calm, final. Final. "I want those bastards buried," in his face. Robert Sinclair wasn't just going to get justice, he was going to destroy them. And for the first time that night, Naomi allowed herself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, the monsters wouldn't win this time. A storm had arrived, but it was not the kind that rattled windows or tore roofs from houses. It was the kind that moved in silence, its power unseen, until it struck with a force so devastating that nothing remained in its wake. Naomi Carter sat at her small, worn kitchen table, staring across at Robert Sinclair, a billionaire who in less than an hour had transformed her modest home into a command center of vengeance. His presence was a force of nature, cold, controlled, terrifyingly calm. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't pacing. He simply sat there, sipping black coffee, like a man waiting for the kill. Inevitable. That's what it felt like. But Naomi knew better. This wasn't patience. This was precision. This was a man calculating his next move with the certainty of someone who had never lost a battle. Across the room, Evelyn Sinclair sat on Naomi's worn-out couch, still pale, still battered, but no longer afraid. Something had shifted in her the moment her husband arrived. Naomi could see it, in the way she sat straighter, in the way her hands no longer trembled, in the way her breathing had steadied. She was no longer a victim. She was a soldier, preparing for war. Naomi exhaled and glanced at Jaden, who stood near the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides. He had barely spoken since Robert arrived, but his eyes burned with something raw, unrelenting. "What happens now?" Naomi finally asked, breaking the silence. Robert set his coffee down gently, too gently. His voice was smooth, almost conversational. "Now?" A pause, a slow, deliberate breath. "Now we end this." Naomi folded her arms. "And how exactly do you plan on doing that?" Robert leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "I destroy them." His tone was calm, absolute. "Their careers, their reputations, their very existence. They will regret the day they were born." Jaden exhaled sharply. "Good. They deserve it." Robert turned to him, studying him for a long moment. "You hate them, don't you?" Jaden's jaw tightened. "They've been harassing us for months, shaking us down, threatening my mom, and now they tried to kill your wife." His voice dropped to a low, trembling growl. "I don't just hate them, I want them to suffer." Robert nodded, as if approving of Jaden's anger. Then he looked at Naomi. "They threatened you." But her eyes were hard. "They took money from me. Forced me to fix their damn squad car for free. Made it clear that if I didn't do what they wanted, my shop would suddenly fail inspection and be shut down." Robert's expression didn't change. He simply pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. His voice was flat, lethal. "Start the background checks." A pause. "Then find every dirty deal, every bribe, every single stain on those bastards' records. I want them ruined. And make sure their superiors get a copy of everything." Jaden's eyes widened slightly. "You can do that? Just like that?" Robert finally smiled. "Money makes things happen. A small sip of coffee. Power makes things permanent." Naomi watched as Robert's men moved like a well-oiled machine, making calls, sending messages, Within minutes, things were already in motion. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice sharper than before. "We don't just take their badges." Her blue eyes were ice. "We take their freedom." Robert nodded. "I already have an FBI contact digging into them, but that's not enough. We need a witness. Someone on the inside. Someone willing to testify." Naomi scoffed. "You think anyone in the department is going to turn against them? Cops protect their own." Robert smirked. "Not if they fear me more than they fear their own." Somewhere across town, a dimly lit bar. Officer Greg Maddox sat in a booth nursing his third whiskey. The place was nearly empty. Just a few regulars, drowning their own miseries. Maddox's fingers tapped against the rim of his glass. Something felt off. Ever since they left that black woman's house, he had been uneasy. He had seen it in her eyes. She wasn't scared. And that meant she knew something. Across from him, Wallace shifted uncomfortably. Something was wrong. They just didn't know what. Wallace swirled the last of his whiskey, his fingers clumsy on the glass. "You think she really don't know nothin'?" he muttered. Maddox exhaled through his nose. "Doesn't matter, we'll find out soon enough." Wallace chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, I still can't believe you left that rich bitch alive. You should've." Maddox's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his blood ran cold. Internal Affairs requesting immediate meeting. His stomach clenched. What the hell? Then, his phone buzzed again. This time, a text message. Blocked number. Maddox clicked it open. One sentence. "Enjoy your last night of freedom. Tick-tock." A shiver ran down his spine. "What?" Wallace asked, blinking sluggishly. Maddox didn't answer. He just stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the bar. Something was happening, and for the first time in his career, he was afraid. Back at Naomi's house, the tension had begun to ease because it had become clear. Robert Sinclair was a man who kept his promises. Naomi sat beside Jaden, both of them watching as Robert's team moved like assassins, wielding paperwork instead of knives. "What happens when they realize they're screwed?" Jaden finally asked. Robert sipped his coffee. His voice was calm, certain. "They'll panic, they'll try to run." A pause, and then they'll beg. Naomi shook her head. "And what if they try to come back here? To clean up loose ends?" Robert set his cup down, a quiet clink. Then, his voice dropped into something colder. "Then I stop waiting and start hunting." A silence settled over the room. Evelyn exhaled, leaning back against the couch, her eyes dark but steady. "It's already over for them, isn't it?" She wasn't really asking. She already knew. They just don't know it yet. Naomi looked at Evelyn, at Jaden, at Robert. And for the first time in a very, very long time, she believed it. The morning sun had barely started its slow ascent over the city, and the cracks in Officers Greg Maddox and Dean Wallace's lives had begun to split wide open. For years, they had moved like ghosts through the system. Untouchable. Above the law. Predators in uniform. But overnight, the shadows they had hidden in began to evaporate. It started with the phone calls. Maddox was barely awake, his head pounding from too much whiskey the night before. When the first call came, he groaned, grabbing his phone off the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Chief Daniels. His stomach twisted. Maddox sat up, clearing his throat before answering. "Maddox." The voice on the other end was cold. Clipped. "Get to the station, now." Maddox frowned. "What's going on?" The chief's voice dropped into something dangerous. "The FBI just walked in, asking about you and Wallace. And Internal Affairs is already setting up an inquiry. You better get your ass down here and explain." Click. Maddox stared at his phone. His pulse hammered against his ribs. FBI. Internal Affairs. That meant one thing. Someone had talked. Maddox grabbed his gun, his badge, threw on his uniform, and stormed out of his apartment. But the nightmare was just beginning. By the time Maddox reached the station, there were already reporters outside, and the walls he had once hidden behind. There were already reporters gathering outside. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions. Maddox shoved his way through the doors, his heart pounding. Inside the station, chaos. Cops whispered to one another. Heads turned in his direction. People who had once greeted him with nods now looked at him like a disease. Then, from the corner of his eye, he spotted Wallace. The man was sitting in an interrogation room, his face pale, his hands shaking. 2 FBI agents sat across from him. Maddox's stomach dropped. This was bad. Maddox, my office, now. Chief Daniels, a stocky, grizzled man with gray at his temples and rage in his eyes, stormed toward him. Maddox followed, his mind racing. How the hell did this happen so fast? The moment they entered the office, Daniels slammed the door shut. Then he threw a thick file onto the desk. Maddox glanced down, and what he saw made his blood turn ice cold. Documents, bank statements, recorded conversations, surveillance photos, everything. Every shady deal, every illegal shakedown, every crime he thought he had buried under the weight of his badge. Daniel's voice was filled with venom. You dumb bastard. How the hell did you think this wasn't going to come back to bite you? You really thought you were untouchable? Maddox gritted his teeth. Chief, listen, this is a setup. Someone's trying to take me down. Sharp, humorless. Oh, I know exactly who's taking you down. He leaned in, his voice low and deadly. Robert Sinclair. Maddox felt his world tilt. Sinclair. That name alone was enough to strike fear into anyone in the city. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was power incarnate, the kind of man who could erase people from existence without ever stepping inside a courtroom. Maddox's mouth went dry. It's not possible. You shouldn't even know about this. Daniel's eyes burned. Oh, he knows. And guess what? He's already moving, faster than you can run. Then, the door opened. 2 FBI agents stepped inside. The taller one, a sharp-eyed man in a crisp black suit, pulled out a warrant. His voice was smooth, unshaken. Final. Greg Maddox, you're under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder. Maddox's chest tightened. No, this is bullshit. His voice rose in desperation. But before he could reach for anything, his gun, his badge, his last shred of power, one of the agents slammed him against the desk and locked the cuffs around his wrists. The station erupted into whispers. Officers stared. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. Maddox was dragged out of the chief's office like a common criminal. His heart pounded. His future crumbled. As he was led through the station, his gaze locked onto Wallace. Being escorted out as well, his face stricken, his eyes hollow. Wallace turned to him, panic twisting his features. Maddox, do something. His voice was desperate. You said we were safe. You said they'd never come for us. Maddox had no answer, because the truth was painfully clear. They had lost. Back at Naomi's house, the tension finally began to ease. The news broke within hours. 2 corrupt officers arrested, charges stacking against them like bricks, sealing their fate. Jaden sat beside his mother at the kitchen table, refreshing the newsfeed on his phone. The monsters weren't just falling, they were crumbling. And for the first time in his life, Jaden believed in justice. Aiden sat at the kitchen table, his phone in his hands, watching the downfall of the men who had terrorized them for so long. He read aloud. Greg Maddox and Dean Wallace, longtime officers of the Detroit PD, have been taken into federal custody following an ongoing corruption investigation. Naomi, ex-shouldered. For the first time in months, she turned toward Robert, who sat across from them, calm, unreadable, but victorious. You did it. Naomi's voice was quiet. Robert sipped his coffee. Then, he set the cup down. No. His blue eyes met hers. You did. Naomi frowned. Me? Robert nodded. You saved my wife. You stood your ground. You didn't let them break you. That's more power than most people will ever have. Unsure how to respond, for a long moment, Evelyn had been quiet. Then, she finally spoke. You changed everything. Her voice was soft, certain. She looked at Naomi. Because of you, those men will never hurt anyone else again. Jaden sat up straighter, his young face filled with something new. Pride. Naomi felt something tighten in her throat. She had spent so long fighting to survive, to keep her son safe, to keep her business alive. But now, for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She had won. Morning. The first light of dawn bathed the house in warmth, and for the first time in a very long time, it truly felt like home. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp pavement and the distant hum of the city slowly waking up. But for Naomi Carter, this was the first morning in a long time that didn't feel like a battle waiting to happen. The air inside her small home felt lighter. The weight that had pressed down on her chest for months was now lifted. She stood by the window, watching the sunlight stretch across her quiet street, thinking about how different today was from yesterday. Yesterday, she was a woman struggling to keep her repair shop open, trying to protect her son from a world designed to break them before they could ever rise. Yesterday, she was just a black mother doing what she had to do to survive. But today, she was a woman who had fought back and won. Robert Sinclair sat at the kitchen table, his sharp blue eyes flicking over every line of text on his phone, scanning the latest updates. Everything had fallen into place, like a well-played game of chess. Greg Maddox and Dean Wallace were done. The system that had once protected them had turned against them overnight. Their fellow officers, the ones who had looked the other way for years, were now distancing themselves, avoiding the fire. Their police records were being torn apart by internal affairs. The FBI was digging deeper into their past, and every dirty secret they had buried, every bribe, every assault, every moment they had abused their power, was now out in the open. Naomi folded her arms, still staring out the window. Are they really going away for good? Robert's voice was calm, certain. Yes. She turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. There was none. They'll never wear a badge again, Robert continued. And when the trial starts, they'll be lucky if they walk away with anything less than 20 years in a federal prison. Jaden, who had been sitting quietly, let out a slow breath. Good, he muttered. They deserve worse. Robert glanced at him, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, he spoke. Justice takes many forms, but sometimes justice wasn't enough. And Robert Sinclair wasn't the kind of man to leave loose ends. Robert's voice was calm, measured. But then, he let the words hang in the air. Naomi understood. Robert Sinclair wasn't just a man who relied on legal battles. He was a man who made sure justice happened, one way or another. Evelyn, now sitting beside her husband, her injuries still healing, but her spirit unshaken, finally spoke. They left me to die. Her voice was steady, but edged with something darker. If Naomi and Jaden hadn't found me, I wouldn't be here. And those men would still be out there, hurting others. Her gaze flicked to Naomi, then to Jaden. You saved my life. Naomi shook her head. I did what anyone with a heart would do. Evelyn smiled softly. No, you did more than that. A long silence stretched between them. Then Evelyn turned to her husband. Robert, I want to help them. Naomi frowned. Help us? How? Evelyn leaned forward, her fingers interlocking. Naomi, your shop is barely hanging on. And Jaden, you deserve opportunities. A real education, a real future. Immediately tensed. She had spent her whole life working for everything she had. She wasn't the type to accept handouts. Not even from a woman she had risked everything to save. Evelyn must have sensed it, because she smiled. This isn't charity. Her voice was soft but firm. This is an investment. Naomi narrowed her eyes. What kind of investment? Robert finally set his phone down and turned toward Naomi. I want to fund your business. His voice was steady, certain. New equipment, a better location, more staff. Everything you need to turn it into the most successful auto shop in the city. Naomi blinked. Why? Robert's answer was simple. Because you're damn good at what you do. And because power is wasted if it's only used for the rich. Naomi opened her mouth to argue, But before she could, Jaden spoke up. And me? His voice was cautious, almost disbelieving. Evelyn smiled. You're going to school, Jaden. A real school, the best one we can get you into. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. No one had ever spoken about his future like that before. Naomi felt her heart twist. This was everything she had ever wanted for her son, the opportunity to break the cycle, to have a life where he didn't have to fight for scraps. But was it too much? Robert saw the hesitation in her eyes. His voice was calm. Naomi, a pause. I don't make offers twice, but I also don't offer help to people who haven't earned it, and you have. You saved my wife's life. Let me return the favor. Naomi looked at Jaden, her boy, the reason she had fought so hard all these years. Then, she looked at Evelyn, at Robert. Finally, she nodded. Her voice was quiet. But if I take this deal, I work for it. No charity. Wouldn't expect anything less. Weeks passed, then months. The world moved forward. But Greg Maddox and Dean Wallace did not. Their names became synonymous with disgrace. Their families disowned them, their careers were erased overnight, and when the trial finally came, they were sentenced to 25 years. No parole, no second chances. Naomi never looked back. With Robert's investment, Carter Auto Repair became one of the most successful shops in Detroit. No one questioned whether a black woman could run a business, because she had already proven herself. And now, the whole city knew it. He had already proven he could survive. Now, he was going to do more than that. Jaden Carter was officially enrolled in one of the best private schools in the city. At first, it was intimidating. Being surrounded by wealthy kids who had never known hunger, who had never had to dodge eviction notices, who had never watched their mother break her back to keep them alive. But he didn't let it shake him, because he had already survived worse, and one day, he was going to change the world. Months later, Naomi stood in her brand-new auto shop, hands on her hips, watching as Jaden helped one of the mechanics fix a car. He was older now, wiser, taller, a boy who had once felt powerless. Now, he was limitless. Behind her, Evelyn Sinclair leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. You still don't regret saving me, do you? Not yet. Evelyn laughed, shaking her head. Naomi turned back to her son, her shop, her future. No, she didn't regret it, not for a second, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was living, and this time, she had won.